Jon Machota, do you read us over?
I read you. Do you guys read me?
Yeah, there
Right.
it is. He sounds better than ever.
You do. Look great.
He does.
Slim.
So,
I like your guys' outfits there.
outfit.
No puppet.
This is a statement, Machota.
I like that.
Yeah,
Our silent protest because it does nothing.
yeah. It doesn't do a whole lot, but
Are you guys going to go to that game when he comes back?
oh, I'm there. I'm planning big things, bud. That I will be there, and it'll probably be the last time I'll be in the AAC.
I see the ticket prices on the secondary market like start at 300, and I just can't do that, especially with watch him like something happens and he doesn't end up playing in that game, and now I'm paying $300 to watch. I don't know. I guess maybe LeBron, but yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, to be very clear, these were given to us. I did not pay for
okay.
these.
Nice.
This was a listener who has season tickets who no longer wants them and never wants to go back to the building. So he sold a bunch of them and he gave a couple to us. So, yeah, it's all worked out for us. I wanted to give you a quick chance to promote, besides obviously The Athletic. What is like the other YouTube?
And the One Star.
The One Star, of course. But what is the other?
Podcast.
I think you're working with our buddy Law Nation.
Yeah, I do a little bit with them twice a week. It's called the Cowboys Collective. And so there's 4 of us who the other 3 guys are more on the YouTube streaming side, which I need to do more in that space for the Cowboys. Many people have told me that there's good money to be made there that I'm losing out on. So kind of dipping my toe in that water. But then, yeah, I still do the One Star Cowboys podcast with Saad Youssef, at The Athletic, and KT and Kent.
I want to start with this. Were you surprised? You see the Javonte Williams deal and you see Rico Dowdle signs elsewhere. That almost looks like the same deal to me. It looks like with incentives, maybe they can both get to 6. How far apart are those?
They're not very far apart. Those 2 deals to me certainly seem like Rico Dowdle thought he would get more money on the open market, and I don't think the Cowboys were waiting to see what he could get, and so they were like, well, we're going to pay Javonte Williams. I don't know this, but they could also think that Javonte Williams is just a better player overall. So I just find it hard to believe when I saw that deal that Rico got yesterday, where it's basically $3 million. I think it can be worth up to 4 or 5 with the Carolina Panthers. I find it hard to believe that was his goal all along. I think he probably felt he'd get a couple of years and maybe 4 or 5 million per year, 2 years, 10 million, something like that. So that's what I think happened there. I think that he thought his market might be a little bit greater, and they were like, all right, well, we're going to go another direction then, because we're really just trying to fill a spot that we're going to pair with somebody we draft.
I wonder if the Cowboys, they also don't read the market well sometimes. I wonder if they're the ones who kind of just figured, this, he'll make more on the open market. We got to go after somebody who will be cheaper, and didn't really even try to go after Rico.
I mean, that is completely possible. I mean, there's no way that you can just watching how the Cowboys do business. That wouldn't be a total surprise to me either. Because I mean, to be fair to the Cowboys, I mean, I look at some of the other deals that got done, and of the guys that left Dallas, like Jordan Lewis and DeMarcus Lawrence, and I'm just like, they were never coming close to those deals. And frankly, I really don't think they should have anyway. So, they're pretty cheap in free agency. They're really trying to get 1-year deals. They're not really trying to spend very much money. That's been pretty much clear for the last 3-4 years and beyond. So, that wouldn't surprise me either.
My thing on the running back deal was just, so I out of curiosity, looked this morning, and they had the lowest allocation for running back on their cap last year, like by a lot. Also the lowest in tight end, which sometimes can be a good thing because it means you have guys popping who are young, but for them it was not. I don't understand why teams don't just sign both of these type of players and then you don't have to use a top 4 pick on a running back. I feel like you have a way better chance at getting a running back in the free agency market who can be decent for you than you do a wide receiver. And conversely, I feel like if you want a good receiver, it has to come from the draft. I think they're doing this backwards, is what I'm saying. I would have preferred to just have Williams and Dowdle. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a bad way to look at it. My only thing I would add to that is that not every draft class is created equal. And just from the week I spent in Indianapolis at the Combine, I know that they think very highly of this running back draft class in terms of like what you could potentially find in the second, third, fourth, maybe even fifth round. And I think that factored into their decisions too. Whereas maybe, they enter free agency and they're like, man, there's nothing in this running back class. We better sign a couple guys because we're not finding anything in this draft. There's like 3 guys that we like. What are the chances we get one? But I don't get the sense that they feel that way. They feel like they can get someone that they can turn into, not necessarily Zeke, but maybe it's Tony Pollard. Maybe it's, another DeMarco Murray, who was a 3rd-round pick. And I think that's a good strategy. I just thought that should have been the strategy the last 2 years. They should already have that guy on the roster.
Well, they got the guy that's related to one of their scouts.
Leave Deuce alone.
Well, great story. Good little Instagram thing, right? Yeah, it just seems like this is yet another offseason. It just feels like it so far. The draft hasn't happened yet, but another offseason where it feels like the subtractions from the team are going to outweigh the additions to the team.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, it's the pieces they've added are fine. They're just not really many guys on there. I mean, retaining Osa Digizua was the most important one, but yeah, you lose Lawrence and you really don't have you lose Lawrence, and that's okay, I guess, if you know what you have for sure in Sam Williams and Marshawn Nealon, but those are some big question marks. And if they show up and they play well, that's great. But this is a defensive line that just 2 years ago, was starting a DeMarcus Lawrence still playing at a high level, and Micah Parsons, and the backups were Dante Fowler and Dorrance Armstrong. And now you're looking at Peyton Turner is probably your 4th defensive end. I thought that the deal that Chauncey Golston got, I thought that was worthy of bringing him back on. And I just go back to, they have so many holes to fill in the draft that, yeah, you can get a good defensive end at somewhere in the first few rounds, but you also right now need a number 2 receiver. You need a starting type running back. You need another starting corner. You probably could use another starting caliber offensive lineman, probably another defensive tackle. And so, the edge rusher spot there, pretty thin without Marcus Lawrence.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot on Micah this year. A lot. Probably the most there's been at any point. But I still think up front, I just had this realization kind of this morning. As I'm a Cowboy fan, I'm allowed to say that. So I want Dak to perform well, but we're on the back half of his prime. And the reality is, if you want the Cowboys to be successful for the next 3 or 4 years, they have to have a plus offensive line, I think. I just don't think it's going to work as his athleticism continues to decline, just natural. I don't think they can even have an average offensive line. So it's almost like they just have to go back to the Garrett days of just, if Dak's going to play here till he's 35, we have to keep throwing top 2-round picks at the offensive line. I'd have no problem with that this year. Even though, Guyton struggled, I think you just keep taking shots.
Yeah, and the thing that really backs up your point on that is I'm a big believer in everything really that goes on and has been going on the last few years in Philadelphia, and that's certainly what they did. They have a more mobile quarterback, but they gave him the big money, and they still were like, no, we need to put probably the league's best offensive line and maybe the league's best running back in there. And while Jalen Hurts got MVP, anybody that watches that game and has watched this Eagles team knows that it's not like he just put that on his back and won it. They had a great supporting cast, but to your point, yeah, the Jason Garrett era, he gets made fun of a lot, but his idea and the way that they went about things, I didn't think was a bad plan, to be honest with you, especially on offense. It was, hey, we're going to put a good offensive line in Ezekiel Elliott behind Tony Romo, and this is going to prolong Romo's career. Now, it didn't happen because of the back issues, but it ended up being the perfect situation for a young Dak Prescott to step into, where everything wasn't on his plate, and that would be great to get back to. But the part of it, though, that I've always thought, no one's ever told me this, but I just me observing, I felt like when Dak started getting paid the big contracts, that Jerry was like, first of all, he had a fight on those deals with Dak's agent, Todd France. And I'm sure there were days where Jerry was very upset and very frustrated. And so I always felt like it was Jerry being like, all right, Dak, I'm going to give you this money, but now you're going to have to go carry more of the load. You're going to have to do more. You're going to have to start carrying this team. And while I get that, and that might be fine in some business sense of you being your manager at your local company, I don't know if that works for NFL quarterback. Guys are who they are. And there's probably only maybe 3-4 quarterbacks in the league that you can be like, well, we can take a little bit more off their plate, like, and they can carry more, like a Mahomes, which even though that caught up with him in the Super Bowl. But I've always felt like Jerry's got a little bit of sour grapes about how much money he's had to give Dak, to where he's almost like, I'm not going to do that much in free agency last year. This is on McCarthy and Dak. They need to take this team to another level. And he'll never admit that, but I'm just going by the actions and what I've seen.
Man, I feel like context clues, that's spot on. I mean, for one, he actually did once say that about Romo. He said something to the effect of like, Romo, he's good enough in the pot. We don't even have to have a great offensive line with this guy. And then, your quarterback's sitting there like, I mean, is that what we're doing? Because I can move around, you're just laying me out to dry here? And then as many times, that's what Jerry means when he says all in.
As everybody would ask him last year.
He's like, I pay Dak. I mean, it's all about Dak now.
Yeah, and then like, once he did CD, he'd be like,
yeah,
CD too, all in. Like, no.
But there's something to that.
That's why I look at 2023 as this core's might have been their height. Because that was the time. And everything was great, and then they had that, the dud against Green Bay in the playoffs. But you're right there. And so Philly also thought 2023, they're in the playoffs, but we're right there. So what should we do now? And Philly thought, well, let's add to this, and you see what happened. And then the Cowboys did the exact opposite. They just, again, another year of subtracting more than they added. That's the feeling you got as last year went on.
Yeah, it's not common in sports for this to happen, but I feel like when I was in the locker room, or when I was watching the Packers that loss in the playoffs, I thought it was bad. And in the locker room after the game, I kind of even thought it was worse. Later on that offseason, I thought it was even worse than that. And it's even worse now than it was then, and it might even look worse 5 years from now when you really – the thing that really added onto it for me this year is, as I mentioned earlier, about the Fowler and Dorrance Armstrong. Those are key pieces on a Washington team that just went to the NFC Championship game. Those are your backups. You didn't even really need them to be studs up front. And then the offense was pretty healthy across the board going into that game as well. And so there is just a part of me that Jerry was so frustrated that not only did they lose that game, but the way they lost it, that he was like, well, I'm not going to add anything more than this. Mike, Dak, they can Micah Parsons, whoever. What's out there right now, you guys take this thing to the next level, and then we'll reassess. And that's why I thought, I really did think, and I know it sounds foolish to say it now, but I'm just, to be completely honest, I really did not think that they were going to get a contract done with Dak before the season. I really thought Jerry was going to let him play that thing out and be like, hey, put this thing on your back, take us to the next level. I'll give you whatever you want in the offseason. And I also think that at some point during that offseason, he did think about that and was thinking about it a lot. And I think whether he was talked out of it or the pressure got to him, but let's be honest, how many deals happen in the last minute the way that one did right before the team? I mean, that was hours before they took the field in Cleveland. He was in a Cleveland hotel room. For that to happen the way it did, it really made me think that, like, Jerry just made a rash decision late instead of being like, let this thing play out. Now, he still might have given him a contract right now after the season went the way it did. But I did think that his all in was, we're going to be all in on this team and then we'll reassess. But then when you give CD and Dak those contracts, like, you're really not all in because they're not going anywhere. Like, You can't do a rebuild. You just paid those two guys. You're going to pay you're going to pay Micah. There's no rebuilding when you have those contracts on the book. So it's going to kind of be more the same unless you want to do something with your roster building. And as we sit here today, it doesn't really look like that's going to be any different.
Did you guys see Micah on Twitter yesterday?
Did he just say, like, now's my time or something?
It's my time. Little lion head. Not the queen. That they tried to nickname him the Queen when he first started
because of chess.
Yeah, but that just didn't fit with football.
Didn't quite work.
He's the Queen. Look at him go.
No, I think it's fun. The Jerry thing is funny. You're basically describing Jerry as like a parent who caught Dak with cigarettes, and now he's like, all right, you're on your own. Smoke them all. Good luck. Hope you make it to the other side. And it's
you wanted all this money.
You wanted it. Here
I mean, we said publicly the pie's only so big.
You're big time here. So as far as other free agents out there, it feels like we should just not expect anything of note that moves the needle. But no Cooper Kupp, no other brother Diggs, nothing in the offing there.
So for me, I don't hear anything on Cooper Kupp, but there is a part of me that thinks back to 2 off seasons ago when no one was hearing anything about Gilmore or Cooks. Those completely came out of nowhere. And I do think that those are still a possibility, some type of move like that, because that's what the Cowboys want. They want 1-year deals with like some veteran player types that, hey, if it doesn't work out this year, you're not counting against our cap beyond this season. And so it's tough to say who those players are right now on another team. It might be something that a team doesn't even want to do until they get closer to the draft and figure out what they might be doing in the draft before they trade a veteran wide receiver or a veteran corner or something along those lines, maybe a veteran pass rusher. That's where I could see them making a notable move. I don't see them getting Kupp. I don't see them getting Stephon Diggs. I'm trying to think who else is out there. Asante Samuel Jr. I know a lot of people would like that just because of their need at corner. I don't necessarily see that happening either. I mean, they've pretty much showed their hand that they're probably going to do pretty cheap 1-year deals, that it's going to be on guys that are just, complete bargains. And there's a good chance out of all the bargains they've signed, they really don't get much out of those guys at all. But they're filling out their roster, and that's just kind of how they do business. They don't take big risks.
So when they make a trade, like they seem to really be attracted, like if somebody calls and says, hey, they were a first-round pick at one point, the Cowboys will trade for him. But let's say it's that who was the guy from the Bills they traded for?
Elam?
Kaiir Elam?
Yeah. Because it's funny because you see, go to Bills Reddit or something and all the fans are just happy that they got rid of this guy who sucked.
Same thing with Kenneth Murray.
Yeah. So, but when they make a trade like this, that's a player that Jerry's never heard of. So who's making that trade? Is it like who is acting as GM when they do trades? Because certainly when they do, all the draft process is
Will McClay and his staff.
Is Will McClay acting as GM on these trades too? Is he making a phone call? Jerry's not making that call, is he?
I think on some he might, but I think it starts with, I think Steven is the more involved, but they turn to Will, for his advice, and the scouting staff, especially because when you mentioned the first round picks, those are obviously guys that they thought a decent amount about when they were in the draft. So they could have some value on those guys because they're thinking, hey, this guy in our system, we might be able to get a little bit more from. With that being said, use Elam for example, whenever they do a guy like that, just because I'm good friends with Dane Brugler and he works at The Athletic, I always go to his draft guide and read, okay, what does he have? So 2 years ago when Elam was coming out, or 3 years ago it was, out of Dane's top 5 corners, Elam was on there, but so was Andrew Booth, who we've seen, when he's got on the field, it's not. And you go back a few drafts before that, Noah Igbenogany was a guy that was like that. But then he comes to the Cowboys, and let's not even make this just about the Cowboys. Let's look at the guys the Cowboys have lost, just because I like how, Dan, you brought up the other fans, the way they feel. Look at the first and second round picks that the Cowboys have moved on from, that other teams probably thought hey, man, we're getting Taco Charlton. He was a first round pick. We're getting Tristan Hill. He was a second round pick. We're getting Kelvin Joseph. He was a second round pick.
People were excited about Connor Williams for about a month.
Yeah.
If you recall.
No, exactly.
Yeah, obviously, if you get picked in the first round, it's going to follow you the rest of your career.
Yeah, and I can see both sides of that. On one hand, you're like, well, it depends on what grade we had on the guy. They were very high on Mingo, apparently, right? And so I could see both ways. On one hand, you're like, well, we have the information. We trust it. We graded him. Now that the cost has come down, we think he's a little bit worth it. Some of that, though, is ego of well, we trust our evaluation from 3 years ago or 2 years ago more than, 500 snaps in the NFL where the player's not been that effective.
Yeah, and our ability to develop players, maybe.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's tough to knock.
I think they also look at it. They're not giving up much.
Exactly. The cost is very low.
Let's kick our tires on this. We know that out of all these first round pick guys that we trade for, we might hit on one, but we need to let's at least do this because we're not doing anything else. So maybe we get the benefit of the doubt that one of these guys ends up being better in our system. But we're not a big player for notable players. So maybe this is the way that we, another one that they're big on is making some counting on getting guys to contribute that they sign after the draft, undrafted rookie free agents, where like that's fine if you get, hey man, it's great if you fall upon a Tony Romo or a Miles Austin or even a Cole Beasley. I mean, there are players, but I mean to count on that just seems pretty bold. And I feel like that's what we're heading into again this year with just all the holes they have to fill. I mean, they have a lot of draft picks, but I think that they lean a little bit too much into that. But it's hard to really blame the entire front office when this is mostly because this is the way Jerry and Steven want to do business. Because you go back to 2020, as bad as or as little as they've done in free agency. You go back to 2020 when there was a new head coaching staff, there was a new, Mike McCarthy comes in. I just looked this up. Like if you look at NFL.com's top 100 free agents, they signed like 7 of them that year. Don Terry Poe, Gerald McCoy, Everson Griffin. The number 1 free agent that offseason was Amari Cooper. They gave him a $100 million deal. They didn't work out. Clinton Dix, Andy Dalton, Greg Zuerlein. Like a lot of them didn't work out, so people just dismiss it. Gerald McCoy got hurt in training camp, never ended up playing for him. But because things like that happen, I always believe that they overcompensate after it. Like, oh, well, that happened. Well, we're not doing anything close to that again. And you can say that about running back we paid Zeke, we drafted running, we're not doing that again. And then they go far to the other extreme where it's just like, so now you're not going to invest really anything in running back. Like there has to be it's almost like when things go wrong for them, like they operate almost in anger in their response to it.
Yeah. You talk about going far to I was thinking about this the other day. They do seem to be reactionary to whatever they have recently done. Whether the running back thing, I remember back when they wouldn't draft Randy Moss, maybe because of the stuff that Michael Irvin had gotten into, but then Randy Moss turned out to be great, so they're like, well, you know what, we can't let Des Bryant get away, so they draft Des Bryant. But that's why it makes it all the more odd that the one area they are very, very, very consistent in is not spending in free agency. Like, they have held true to that. It's not like every 3 years they'll take a shot, get burned, and then try to, like... And it's very odd because they are what's perceived to be the richest franchise in the world. So why don't they throw any of that money around?
I think it also goes, it's a little bit with 2020, but I think it also goes back to right around 2013, 2014, there was a big change in where Will McClay, he'd been in the front office for a while, but he officially took over the draft. And they drafted really well in 14 with Zach Martin and DeMarcus Lawrence, 2 guys they've obviously lost this offseason. And that 14 season surprised everyone. And I've really felt like since 14, this is just the way that they're going to operate because they're like, man, look what we did in 14. And then we kept that strategy going and look what we did in 16. And we still had some decent amounts. And then look at with Mike McCarthy, we had 3 consecutive 12-win seasons. So I went back and looked. And so if you go back to that point, so 2014 till now, they're 10th. They have the 10th best record amongst NFL teams. And they're better than in the last 10 years than some teams that you probably wouldn't think they are, like the 49ers, for example. My thing on that is you are the Dallas Cowboys. Why not take some big swings where there's some off seasons where you're like, hey, this might cause us some problems down the road, but at least we can always look in the mirror and go, we went for it. We put everything into this. It's been 29 years. Let's take a chance here. And it amazes me that that doesn't happen, that it's like, no, this is how we do business. And this is the way we will continue to do business. And because Jerry's been there the entire time this has gone on, it just leads me to believe that there's probably a lot of that into what's made him successful away from football, whether it be oil drilling or real estate investments and things like that, the way he operates other businesses. And it's made him so much money. So I feel like he just feels like he can do that with the NFL. And some of it is really good, but I just keep going back to, man, 29 years in this league of parity. Maybe change something up here. Maybe take some chances. When I talk about how I like what the Eagles have done, let's not act like the Eagles have done all good things. They've had plenty of swings and misses, but they just continue to stay aggressive, and that just hasn't been the Cowboys, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be the Cowboys anytime soon.
Well, John, we appreciate your time today. You can check him out at The Athletic, of course, One Star Cowboys podcast, and he is a budding YouTube star with Cowboys Collective.
I appreciate that, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
I was giving you a chance to do some YouTube comedy or something. Like,
No, I'm good. I'm
right.
good. No, you did. I like the way you ended it right there. That's good. Maybe
All
I'll
right,
see you guys at that Lakers Mavs game.
okay, talk to you soon. There you go, Jon Machota.